Hey guys, Welsknight here, and I want to bring you today a very important announcement and talk a little bit about Patreon. So, for those of you who haven't already figured it out as a result of the Patreon server tour videos that I posted over the last week or so, my Patreon server is going to be resetting this weekend. So, that's going to be kind of a big deal. It doesn't happen very often. There's no like set amount of time that it goes between resets, but usually it's about a year. It's kind of up to the community and whether or not there's a big update that Mojang puts out, or it's a lot of different stuff. There's no like hard rule as to how often it resets, but it usually ends up being about once a year. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of the Patreon server itself and what it's like, and kind of what to expect if you do want to be a part of the Patreon server community. And I also want to talk a little bit about Patreon itself. So first and foremost, the Patreon server is a mostly vanilla Minecraft server. There are certain things that when you have a certain number of players, like you can see here, I'm on my Patreon page, patreon.com/WelsknightGaming. I've got 115 patrons. The majority of those are whitelisted on the Patreon server. So the whitelist is roughly 100 people, probably, somewhere around there. And when you have that many people, there are certain things that you kind of need as a server in order for the server to function, like modifying one player, making the sleep system work, so not everybody on the server at once needs to be able to sleep, stuff like that. There are some some tools for the moderators and admins to be able to catch people who are stealing, and little things like that. But we try to keep it as close to vanilla for the most part as possible. There's some quality of life stuff. There's some administrative tools. I guess I would kind of liken it to how we do stuff on Hermitcraft. There's some sort of minor vanilla enhancement type things, but it's definitely a vanilla server, and it's a vanilla survival server. So that's one thing to expect. My kind of view on the Patreon server for basically as long as I've had it is that I just provide the server itself, and I essentially let the community sort of run itself. I have a fantastic team of moderators and admins who are all volunteers, who kind of lead the community, so to speak. And obviously, I do have the last say if there's something that really needs my input specifically. But I'm not active in the day-to-day goings-on of the Patreon server. I usually am present for the initial launch of a new season, and then I do the tour at the end, and I might pop on once in a blue moon here and there, but it's pretty rare. So one thing I want to make very clear is that if you are part of the Patreon community who plays on this Patreon server, you shouldn't expect to see me on the server on a regular basis. I simply don't have the time to play on yet another in yet another survival world. I've already got several of them. Obviously I really appreciate my Patreon community. They are fantastic. And it's a wonderful and close community, but I'm not involved with the day-to-day stuff. So that's something I want to make very, very clear for people to kind of set those expectations correctly. With that said, the Patreon community is fantastic. It's very welcoming. It's a wonderful group of people. As I said, I basically let the community sort of run itself. So if there's something that the community kind of decides that they want, hey, we want the Ender Dragon tool to drop Elytra or whatever, that basically gets talked about by the moderators. If the community is overwhelmingly in support of something, it will 99% of the time get implemented unless there's some sort of, technical reason or something that would prevent it. So it's fantastic in that way. It's kind of I don't really know how to explain it, but it's a very, very good community. It is obviously a family-friendly community. I'm a family-friendly channel, family-friendly community, kind of makes sense. Welcoming, we don't care about, what your background is or what your beliefs are or whatever. It's a bunch of people who want to get together and play Minecraft together. That's really what it is. So if you're looking for a good community that's focused on Minecraft, it's a great place to do that. And there are a lot of, you've probably seen the Patreon server tour videos. There are some absolutely fantastic builders on my server. There are builders on my Patreon server who build far better than I do, to be honest. So it's a great place to kind of interact with those types of people as well and learn how to be a better builder, if that's something you're interested in. As far as the how do you become a patron and get access to this server, you go to patreon.com/WelsknightGaming. There is a link in the description of the video. You become a patron, and you have to pledge at least the $10 tier. So normally what happens is when you pledge to me on Patreon, nothing happens until the first of the following month, which is when Patreon processes all of those pledges. So basically, if you sign up using a credit card, your card does not actually get charged until the first of the month. Once that whole thing processes through Patreon, Patreon sends me a notification saying, congratulations, here's all the pledge for the month. And then what I usually do is at that point, I send out messages to all the new people and explain, with the details concerning, I'll use the Patreon server as an example, with the details concerning how to get access to the Patreon server and the whitelisting process and stuff like that, or, whatever it may be. I will send out messages regarding the specific rewards on the first of the month. That's how it, or I shouldn't say on the first, shortly after the first. It depends on how long Patreon takes to process that stuff. It's usually around the 4th or the 5th of the month, sometimes a little later, it just depends. However, that's the normal process, but since the Patreon server is resetting this weekend, and because, excuse me, I have hiccups, and because the Patreon server tour videos didn't start until we were already in the middle of July, I want to make sure that everyone who wants to be a part of the Patreon server right at the very beginning of this season, Season 5, will be able to do so. So I'm going to make an exception to that rule. So I am notified whenever somebody signs up on Patreon for the first time, and I will send you a message. I'm planning to send out a massive, massive number of messages today and tomorrow. So if you want to be a part of the Patreon server right at the very beginning of this season, the clock is ticking because after the server reset actually happens, I'm going to say I'll probably still whitelist people through, I'll say Sunday. But after that, you're going to have to wait until August. So if you want to be part of the very beginning, now is the time. So I think that is pretty much it. I don't want this video to get too long. It's really just kind of an informational thing, an announcement saying, hey, Patreon server is resetting. If you want to be a part of it, now is the time to sign up. So I think that's going to do it for me, guys. I appreciate all of your support. It means the world to me, and it helps in more ways than you can possibly imagine. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video.